Hello and welcome to Ask Lovecraft After Dark, a bi-weekly, every 2 week chat show where I sit down either with myself or with a very talented guest. And luckily for everyone here, it is the latter tonight. So we are going to be talking with actor and vlogger Stella Brewster. Stella came to our attention about 2 years ago when she made a video called To Howard from Sonia, and she had a question for Howard Lovecraft from Sonia Lovecraft Greene, Howard's erstwhile wife.
Yeah.
So welcome, Stella.
Hi, everyone.
So let's jump right into it. Why on earth did you decide to, instead of just like sending in an email, hey, what was up with Lovecraft and his weird pseudo divorce, did you decide to like do a full production?
Yeah, so I honestly I fully blame my high school's like just general electives. I took theater, and also there was an elective where you could work in the news show that was the school's announcements for the morning.
Oh, okay.
And I both me and my brother who shot that first video were got into with that. And when I went to college, I had sort of wanted to kind of maybe do something, and then I got into Lovecraft, and I the idea just kind of popped into my head of him having to deal with this because as you say in the videos, he never signed the papers. And what was the deal with that? And like it literally takes half a second. Why can't you just put your name on this stupid piece of paper? Like, come on. And that was something.
Yes.
It was great. And you were absolutely wonderful with getting back to me and sort of planning out that lovely little three-parter. And the answer that you had with the just sort of just generally being afraid of that, well, this is it, this is the end of a thing, and maybe, do I want this to end, do I not want this to end, what's the deal with that? Good. I say that a lot, I'm sorry, but that just makes a lot of sense. So, yay.
Yeah, that was our I believe my very first attempt to do any kind of narrative arc on the show. It's a very standalone show,
Oh
standalone
yeah.
episodes. I have developed a weird canon, or at least a sort of an unscripted show Bible of like how Lovecraft interacts and like sort of what is the mythology of
Oh
Ask
yeah.
Lovecraft. Um, as has been painstakingly detailed in the TV tropes that someone set up for the show,
Oh yes.
which is still one of my favorite artifacts. If nothing
Yeah.
else comes out of this program, the fact that that's
There's
out there.
there's a little footnote about me in there too, which after after the videos I saw that popped up, I was like, oh boy, well that's there for.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd had people send in videos before. I'd had people. I had someone like at a keyboard, just like like kind of playing at a keyboard, asking a question. Someone like filmed a weird brain in a jar asking a
Oh
question.
yeah.
My friends Debs and Errol, or yeah, they
Oh
had
yeah.
they had sent in stuff. So people had done like video questions, but this was the first time someone had really like spun off from the show in a really cool inventive way. And
Yeah.
Lovecraft, Ask Lovecraft itself, I suppose, is technically a spin-off from Derek the Bard and Chasing the Muse.
Oh yeah.
But that was incredibly humbling, incredibly just, I don't know, it was amazing. It was one of the coolest things, to, as a creator, to have someone be like, I want to play in your world now. I like, that looks like fun. I'm going to do some of that. Um, and you're not the only one. There was a guy who decided to create an Ask Hemingway
Oh yeah, I
show
saw that.
from that.
That
But I
would
think
be really interesting.
yours definitely had some of the best production for it, and has had a lot of fun interaction. So let's talk about that first video. Um,
Oh yeah.
from sort of conception to, putting it out there, how long did it take?
Uh, so oh boy, how long did it take? So I'd had the idea for quite a while before I actually got around to doing it. I think I I'd had the idea before, so that little that section when I was doing those videos, I had so I was in college. I had done the first semester of that year at the community college at home, and my parents were letting me do the second semester away from home. And pretty much as soon as I got moved into the dorm, like about maybe a month or a month and a half after that, I was like, well, okay, here we go. And I wrote my brother, which he's so patient with me. I
It's nice to have patient bro as the youngest son,
oh god,
with two much older brothers who've had to put up with my shenanigans. I definitely
yep,
definitely appreciate that.
yeah, and he's just great in general because he is not really into Lovecraft. He's not into horror fiction or really genre fiction apart from The Hobbit or, pretty much anything like that. But he's let me just rant about like, oh my god, I read the story and you have to hear about this plot point. And, oh, have you seen this movie, Reanimator? Have you seen that? Here, let me show you this thing, And he's just been great.
Well, how did you get into well, twofold. First, how did you get into Lovecraft, and how did you discover Ask Lovecraft in particular?
Well, so I when I get into things, I don't just like dip my little toe in. I get like dive head first, and
Yes.
I figure out literally everything I can about what I'm interested in until there is nothing left for me to consume.
Excellent.
So I when I was doing all the Sonia videos, that was my second year of college. The first year of college, toward the end of it, I got into the podcast Welcome to Night Vale.
Oh,
And
yes.
they one of the books that they were plugging at the end of their shows at the start there, this would have been early 2015. Uh, it was a book called the unused story ideas of H.P. Lovecraft, and I really liked Night Vale, and I thought, well, who's this Lovecraft guy? So I actually I put in H.P. Lovecraft in the podcast app on my phone, and I came up with the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, actually.
Yes.
And over that summer, I had done a lot of volunteering at my dad's library, scanning all these old documents and stuff, which it tells you a lot about what kind of a person I am. Since it was just me with a scanner and a computer alone in a room for 4 or 5 hours a day, I would just made my way through their entire backlog. And I got to like actually reading some of some of the stories that fall. When was it that fall? No, well, so the library didn't have a whole lot on Lovecraft. I think they had the Dunwich Horror in a like a collection of horror stories, which I was very distracted, so I didn't get through.
That's fair.
I mean, it's now one of my favorite stories. So hey, glow up. But it was a rocky start, and then it really kind of on those early days. I was mainly going off what I had, what I had heard on the podcast, and then what I could sort of glean about Lovecraft as a person, and about the sort of the people writing the stories, and the literary podcast people are very thorough, and they have lots of sort of quotations and readings that they have of the stories. So I felt like I was somewhat confident in knowing about the stories, even though I hadn't actually read them all the way through. And so I got to making the videos and starting my own little series, which is a story for another time. And I, after that semester, that the what did I say? Spring, summer of 2016. I moved back in with my parents and I got a job, and so I suddenly had a disposable income. So I went to Barnes and Noble and I got pretty much everything I could, and then it kind of went from there.
Fantastic. It's funny you mentioned Night Vale because yeah, there's a certain amount of crossover with Lovecraft and Night Vale, except that the creator of Night Vale got into hot water in the Lovecraft community by like going off on Lovecraft and being like Lovecraft, sort of poo-pooing on him. People can think whatever they want about Lovecraft. I'm put out by them because when I was doing my live show for the Toronto Fringe Festival of Ask Lovecraft back in the summer of 2015, I like lost most of my audience to the fact that there was a live Night Vale
no.
That I was competing with, and literally just had so many friends being like, I would come to your show, Lehman, but Cecil's in town. So yeah.
I get you. I get you on that.
All right, so you've discovered Lovecraft through that wonderful world of both podcasting and staying up late at night doing strange bibliographical work. How do you jump from there to finding this strange guy in Toronto? Although I think at this point I was in Ohio. I had shifted from being Canada's foremost Lovecraft impersonator to Ohio's foremost Lovecraft impersonator. How did you find this particular show?
Well, that was, let's see, how was that? That was me looking for H.P. Lovecraft on YouTube and going through all of the videos.
There's a lot.
There are, though. There was, I remember in particular, there was a really good sort of documentary audio thing that the BBC had put out.
Oh, okay.
That was on YouTube, and also some kind of strange video about Miskatonic University cheerleaders.
I'm certain. What else are there? There's the various musicals. It's beginning to look a lot like Fishman. Yes. Hey There Cthulhu.
The animator musical.
The Hey There Cthulhu I found before I was doing the show. And have obviously stolen. There's video of PH singing Hey There Cthulhu at karaoke night.
Oh my God. Yeah, it just kind of went from there. And in that, I also discovered the Lovecraft Historical Society and their joint venture radio theaters, of which I now have almost all of them. And I may or may not have just pre-ordered the Massive Nyarlathotep one, even though like I really shouldn't have, but I did.
I have a love-hate relationship with Historical Society. They have done some truly remarkable work. They are absolutely just brilliant and also so thorough in how they go about it. Unfortunately, because of them, Andrew Lehman will always be the most famous Lehman in the world of Lovecraftiana. So I will be second fiddle to my dying days. But he's a fantastic guy. He did amazing readings on the literary podcast as well. I think I got a chance to see them do a live show, and I've interacted with him in other ways. He was interviewed. I interviewed him when I was in Portland, I think. So there's a fun interview with him, but he's a fantastic guy. Everyone involved with the Historical Society is great. Their Facebook page is a little insane, but but they
you can't win them all.
They make good content. So that kind of, I see now sort of the background of how you came to make your video, and yes, as I said before, it launched my first like multi-part arc So if folks, I shared the link in there, but you folks can find the playlist of Sonia, which starts
Yes.
with Stella's video, and then has Lovecraft's response, which was to run away, which I
Which was
still love.
absolutely hilarious, by the way. When I saw that, I was scrolling through YouTube. I remember on my dorm bed, and I was just like, I just burst out laughing, and I think I scared my roommate a little. It was great.
Yes. Uh, there is yes. So there's me running away. Someone made a GIF of that.
Oh
Someone
yes.
which of me running around, which I had a lot of fun with. And then I got to do what is one of my most favorite episodes, which was the Everything's Fine episode, where I got to pretend to be Lehman Kessler, pretending to be H.P. Lovecraft. And as an acting exercise alone, like I don't care if other people like that episode.
Oh yeah.
For me, that is one of my like most favorite things. Because it's such a fun exercise of, it's the closest I get to doing Orphan Black, it's my Tatiana Maslany little call out. And then the final episode, where
Oh, yes.
Lovecraft does have to, Lovecraft is found hiding in I think an attic of the parish house that we were living in at the time. It was like around a bunch of like dusty Bibles and
Oh,
books of
yeah.
common prayer, and that going from like ridiculous to more ridiculous to an actual like serious kind
Oh
of
yeah.
looking into like what would the response to that be, like why
Mhm.
why is that was that I try to be, obviously I'm creating a caricature and I'm creating a kind of weird homunculus in my portrayal of Lovecraft, but I do at the heart of it want there to be a reality and a humanity. And so that was really important for me to make that happen.
Oh yeah.
Um, and and that comes out of it comes out of my respect for Sonia and their relationship. Sonia Greene is one of the most fascinating people
Oh
and
god,
has
yeah.
such a fascinating story in her of her own self. I say a lot that one of the great tragedies is that she has been so often reduced to Lovecraft's wife, because just her own story, the story of her coming to America, the
Oh
story
yeah.
of how she navigated sort of a misogynist, anti-Semitic, society, and thrived in the midst of
Oh
that,
yeah.
and supported writers, but also was writing herself and was so like keyed
Mhm.
into this
Mhm.
community,
Mhm.
had an infectious energy. And so much of that comes, so much of what I know about Sonia comes from what was really my first real interaction with Lovecraft, which was doing Stephen Neer's play Monstrous Invisible, which was
Oh yeah.
about their marriage. And I'm going to hopefully have Stephen and maybe some of the maybe the director and actors who are in that, because that's just a beautiful play
Oh yeah.
about this relationship, that gets to the heart of both sort of the horror of Lovecraft's imagination, but also just the horror of a marriage falling apart,
Oh gosh.
and trying to play into that. So, but for that show, I was mostly doing research on Lovecraft, not on Sonia.
Mhm.
And
As you
so
do.
I only know Billy Sonia from the play and
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
other readings. One of the things that really struck me when I discovered his letters and was going through reading his letters, there's a
Mhm.
collection of letters with August Derleth, and they're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and
Mhm.
it's got S.T. Joshi has these great extensive footnotes, sort of explaining what's happening,
Yeah.
chronologically. And at one point, Lovecraft talks about like, "Oh, I'll be unavailable. I'm going out of town. I'll be back at this point." It's
Mhm.
sort of this throwaway line. And there's the Joshi footnote. Lovecraft was off seeing Sonia Greene. He will
Yeah.
never mention her in his letters to Derleth, and that's such a weirdly specific detail, right? Like,
Oh
here's this
yeah.
guy communicating, talking back and forth with someone
Yeah.
who's going to be a very important part of his life, but is unwilling to bring up, presumably, another important
Mhm.
aspect of his life. And the implications of that, there's a lot you can read into it. There's a lot of people who look at those letters and like, oh, Lovecraft's, talking with this high school kid and asking him for his picture. Like, what's going on here? I joke that there's literally a point where he's just like, if you have a photo, please do send it. It's like, Lovecraft invents sit and pic, please.
Oh God.
But it was just a fascinating moment. And you've someone who's now delved into Sonia and what there is. I'm really fascinated to hear about that research process, what it's been like to kind of rediscover this again fascinating woman, and then trying to create your own caricature, your own sort of homunculus. Because you not only have done vlog stuff, you've also written in her. You've tried to like kind of find her voice and talk about her navigating 21st century. What's that been like?
Well, it's been a lot more interesting than I thought it would be, especially her interacting with the modern day, because when I was starting out, I thought they would just sort of be like the general, oh, it's the 21st century and there are no jetpacks. What's the deal with that? But they're just with the election and a couple of things that have happened recently, like the Amazon strikes that are going on, and just the general rise of anti-Semitism and like all that stuff. That there's been a couple of just generally. So I have a series plan that I'm going to do as Sonia that I need to get on once I have the time, but of generally just, I thought we went through this already.
Right. I mean, so, it's a problem when all this becomes relevant again and playing kind of 1930s characters. You're like,
yes,
hey guys.
Yeah, and especially it's been doubly interesting for me just personally because I studied history in college, and I just have always loved history, but the 1920s, 30s, 40s in particular, and in just, as you say, and recognizing the sort of things that, like, well, this thing like literally just happened in 1936, and now it's 2016, and but gosh, it's kind of walking the line of wanting to stay true to Sonia as a person, but like as a character, but as a person, and also not wanting to piss off too many people. But then but then I really, so I had the good fortune to be able to move to Providence about a year ago, actually. And Brown University has a collection of her letters, which it absolutely breaks my heart that there aren't more letters to Sonia or from Sonia in regards to Lovecraft, because when they broke up, she burned most of, if not all of, her correspondence with him. And I believe Sam Loveman also did. And as someone who loves history, but also as someone who used to work in an archives, I'm just like, oh God, no, please no. Please
what was I doing? I was just listening to Hamilton again. Doing the show, and I got to Burn. And I thought, like, this is actually really rife for someone to do like a Sonia, Eliza parody.
Oh my God. You're giving me ideas, damn it.
Excellent.
But she, the letters that have survived from her regarding Lovecraft are actually from 1947 and 1948. Brown University has a collection of her letters because at that time, August Derleth was starting Arkham House, and he wanted to include the Invisible Monster in, or the horror at Martin's Beach in one of the collections. And at first, he just wanted her to give him the story gratis, because to him, Lovecraft had written the story and just allowed her to put her name on it. which was not the case at all. And she wrote the story, and he sort of revised and edited it, and it's there's less of his influence in that particular story than there are in his other revisions. In with the others, I'm thinking mainly of The Curse of Yig and The Horror in the Museum, and I think maybe I got that title wrong, but like the Horror in the Museum. The client had given him a sort of synopsis of what they wanted to happen, and he had fleshed it out from there. With this, Sonia had they had been walking along, and they well, actually, hang on. I have the good fortune to have a copy of Lovecraft as I Knew Him,
Oh,
which was
okay.
the sort of memoir biography sort of a thing that Sonia had written about their time as husband and wife, and that where is it here? Yeah. Once we visited Magnolia, Massachusetts. As we walked along the esplanade there one evening, we heard a peculiar snorting, grunting noise loud in the distance. The moon made a path on the water. Emergent tops of piles in the water were connected with rope, like a huge spider web. Oh, Howard, I said, here you have the setting for a really strange and mysterious story. Go ahead and write it, he said. Oh, no, I couldn't do it justice. Try it. Tell me what the scene pictures to your imagination. After we parted for the night, I sat up and wrote the general outline, which he later revised and edited. His enthusiasm next day was so genuine that I surprised and shocked him right then and there by kissing him. Which, oh, sweetie. But there's a good portion of oh boy. So there isn't a whole lot out there about Sonia, but from what there is and what I've been able to find, you can really get a sense of who she was as a person from how she writes about other people or to other people. So for instance, in Lovecraft as I Knew Him, there are, you can really tell that she loved him. She cared for him a lot, and there are a couple of passages in here which are just so sweet. And even after, I believe this was written in 1949, even after all that time and after everything that had happened, as she is writing this, she still has fond memories. And hang on just one second, because my computer is giving me a low battery thing, and I need to grab
that's right.
yeah.
Well, and I mean, this is, and part I'll sort of ramble on about, this is what made the play Monsters Invisible so fascinating, right? Was that it lent into the actual, romance theory. There's so many theories about, about Lovecraft and his relationship with Sonia. Was it a front? Was it just him being rebellious? Was it, him just trying to, find a sugar mama? There's a lot of cynicism, largely because people project a lot of interesting, weirdnesses onto Lovecraft when he already has a lot already. So why you need to invent stuff is a little beyond. But maybe people have been doing it, right? And people have. I think part of it is because of the kind of the outsider nature that he plays with, and he embodies, people like, okay, well, does that mean that Lovecraft was secretly gay, or was he secretly asexual? And, like what, like they sort of try to find ways to explore Lovecraft and see if they can tease out any kind of real hidden meaning. I just finished Night Ocean, this big book, which is very very goes into very explicit language, and how it talks about Lovecraft and his potential relationship with Robert Barlow. This is Paul Lafarge's novel, The Night Ocean. And it's doing weird, like, narrative on top of narrative
Yeah.
It's not presenting like this is exactly what happened. They were having a
Oh, yeah.
relationship. But, the fact that he had so many correspondences with young men, that, while he had a lot of disparaging things to say about, his gay friends, gay
True.
community at large, there have been people have said worse things from inside the closet over
Very
the
true.
centuries. Um, so it's interesting. I personally, and I think I'm biased because
Hmm.
I came to Lovecraft through this play. I like to think of their relationship as genuine,
Mhm.
their friendship as genuine. I think it's complex and complicated.
Mhm.
I think Lovecraft's own family history is tortured, and
Yes.
while he has no shortage of strong women in his life, I
Mhm.
think still how he relates to strong women
Hmm.
is tricky, and
Yeah.
whether that's due to the era of the time. I usually avoid any sort of man of this time
Yeah, yeah.
weirdness, but
Yeah,
it's
of which
there.
I appreciate, because people, in just learning about history in general, people tend to have a view of how things were in the past, and there, there are sometimes there are some things that are true about that, and some things sometimes you just aren't getting the whole picture. Like maybe that was true for like the rich upper crust aristocrats, but not for everybody else. Like my favorite example of this is the Victorians. There was a craze in Victorian, I believe the 1890s, 1880s, somewhere around there, nibble rings.
All right.
They and it wasn't because they thought that it might help with breastfeeding. There were actually a couple of things that were published in various newspapers that said, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't do this because think about the children." Victorians were just straight up freaks.
Well, they had all those, pelvic massages that, to help with
Very
their
true.
conniptions. Um, so they knew they
Yeah.
they knew what was going down.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but that kind of goes back to what you were saying about people projecting onto Lovecraft. They're after a certain point, people think, oh well, he lived in the 40s. Well, my grandfather lived in the 40s, and so he's got to be kind of like my grandfather, right? I mean, he's dead, and he's been dead for such a long time, and pretty much everybody that he knew is dead at this point. So there isn't really anybody to tell them differently. And they're with some of the collections of his letters and the thing that I have that has her Lovecraft as I knew him. This is a limited edition Arkham House thing, which I probably spent too much money on, but and which I haven't regretted at all. But I, it's kind of hard to get firsthand accounts of this guy. And there is one website that has his letters to and from Clark Ashton Smith, which is great. But that's when I was like looking up like who is this Lovecraft guy when I was in college. That was pretty much all that I could find as far as like first or second hand accounts went.
I was very lucky in that I lived in Toronto, and there's a fantastic science fiction collection, the Merrill Collection, in Toronto, as
Oh,
part of the public library system, and they had his published letters with Derleth. Now
oh,
I've since acquired his letters with Robert E. Howard,
oh
which
yeah.
are intense.
That's got to be something.
They just like with the Derleth, and I've got another one with the Robert Bloch. They're like
Yeah,
writing each other these like kind of one page things.
yeah.
Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft were sending each other books. They were just yelling at each other over
Oh
pages and
no.
pages and pages and pages, and it makes it and Lord love the folks who've edited these things together because it's fantastic. Whenever people send me in, like, what did Lovecraft think about this? I'm like, well, what did he think about that? And I
Oh
can look
yeah.
it up and be like, oh, well, here he is,
Oh yeah.
yelling
They
with
talked
how,
about everything.
yelling with Robert E. Howard about Stalin. So I'm able to, pull that up or,
Oh my God.
make a throwaway reference to Tolkien. Like
Oh
there's
yeah.
just, it's, learn how to use your index, kids. That
Oh
it's
yes.
a powerful resource. I was taught pretty much when doing a research paper, just flip, like look at the table of contents, look at
Yep.
the index, see where like the
Yep.
most pages are, and be like, all right, so this book is about this, and you never have to actually read the book. Yay, post-secondary educations. But it's but no, like I mean, the letters. I'm sad I didn't read the letters earlier. Because they completely changed the tone of
Oh
how
yeah.
I understood Lovecraft, how I understood the show. Like if you go back to the first few episodes, which I beg people not to, because my voice is completely different at that point. I'm still filming in front of a bed sheet. I and I'm playing up the like, oh, there's like strange cosmic entities in the walls. Oh, but then
Yeah.
you read his letters and you see how self-deprecating he is, how catty he is. There's a personality there because, aside from all the sexual stuff people kind of throw at Lovecraft,
Yeah.
I think the biggest crime is how Lovecraft has been reimagined as this, Howard Hughes locked away in an attic, shunning all human contact, misanthrope.
Yep.
And part of that is Lovecraft cultivated this like, angry grandpa
Well,
persona.
yeah.
But then he was also writing like 90 letters a day to people. Like he was in constant communication. He was like,
Oh yeah.
going down to Florida to hang out with teenagers
Yeah.
and,
Well,
traveling to
so
Montreal.
the funny thing about that is so reminiscent of internet relationships. That when I first moved out to Providence, I actually, for a couple of days, I visited a mutual friend who was interested in Lovecraft, who actually lives in Virginia, and I had been talking about, oh well, I'm moving out to the East Coast, and she had said, hey, so do you want to come visit? And I was like, yeah, okay, cool, we're doing this. So like, I relate,
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, as much as you don't want to relate to him, there's a couple of things where it's like, oh yeah, I know that. Like the when he went to Florida and he realized, oh, I have actually been corresponding with a teenager.
Yep.
That's a thing.
Well, and in so many ways, Lovecraft is, one of my friends described him as like the nerd, right? He's the guy who's drawing monsters in his, English binder instead of paying attention in class. He's this autodidact, this high school dropout, the guy who, I think a lot of folks who are of a somewhat nerdish disposition, like, it's how they see themselves, right? They idealize themselves as the person who's the smartest person in the room, who no one else can get, the outsider. Precisely. But again, I think the social aspect can't be ignored. And Lovecraft was essentially like the web moderator of his day. The way he was connecting people together, the way he was creating conversation and relationship and curating relationship. You talk about his revising work and the bringing things together. Both his revising work and Andrew Lehman from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. He published just about a year or so ago a collection of Lovecraft's letters with one of his revision clients.
Ooh.
The revisionist.
Yeah.
And so, Lovecraft wasn't just this guy. He was not the stereotypical, guy in this, mom's basement, banging away on his keyboard. He was interacting. He was seeking
He was
people.
Pretty social. And he not just social through letters, social at an arm's length. He actually went to go visit people. He, bringing it back to Sonia, he met her at an Amateur Press Association convention in Boston in 1921. And there was like he was going to these things, and then later on in their courtship, she invited him and Sam Loveman to stay for like a pretty extended period of time in New York with her, and uh, so he was going out and meeting people. And he not only had friends all over the place from writing, but he also like physically went out and met people, which I think people tend to forget because
well, they confuse him with his characters, right? I mean, which is fair because he's definitely,
some of them are pretty thinly veiled self inserts. Randolph Carter.
Yes. But Randolph Carter has friends everywhere. Like that's the whole point. He keeps running to like, oh, hello, King of the Ghouls, my old buddy. Like.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think people talk about Lovecraft's humor, Lovecraft's ability to command a room. I think it's very easy, and I do it because I play up the social awkwardness for jokes and laughs. Because again, it is what people expect, and when you're doing comedy, you have to kind of lean into that and sometimes thwart it. You don't. I wouldn't. I don't think it would be quite right to do H.P. Lovecraft as Brian Blessed. Just well done. I feel like that might be a little jarring to people's expectations. I also don't do Lovecraft's actual voice, which was apparently very.
Oh yeah. She talks about it in the thing. In the story, it was thin and high pitched in conversation, somewhat falsetto.
Yeah, so essentially it'd be like, hi, I'm Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Today we're going to be talking about dark and terrible horrors.
Yeah, with a very thick Rhode Island accent, I might add.
That was the other thing when I was trying to figure out like how Rhode Island to go. And like, I remember, what did I do? Yeah. I think I found like video footage of people doing like school board like meetings because I was trying to like, I need to find like real Rhode Island voices. I was like, no, I'm just going to do this weird Frasier voice that I sort of, because I had to do it for stage, right? Like I couldn't do a super like,
well, and it's hard to project thin and reedy.
Well, I had luckily did not discover the thin and reediness until much later because if I tried to recreate that, have been bad news.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to go to people have been talking throughout our conversation over in the chat, and people say a lot of compliments for your work. They're talking about how you've captured the 1930s aspect so well. Very believable.
That's something that I really like. I really like to try because I love just vintage style in particular, and so I have all these 1930s dresses that were just taking up space. That was part of that was that it's especially the dress that I wore in that first video. I was just kind of like, it was a thing that I had and I hadn't ever worn. And I thought, well, that kind of the neckline of that dress looks kind of like one in this old photo of her. So maybe I can kind of work with it. And it went from there.
Well, it's the hats that could get really expensive really fast.
Yeah. So hats. I am not a hat maker, and yet I love hats in general, and so I die a little inside because the hats that you get nowadays, it's one of two floppy sun hats or a baseball cap. Like that's it. And I thankfully in Providence there are a multitude of vintage stores, and of like the Rhode Island Antique Mall is literally a 10-minute drive, so there have been things like that. But I am actually in the works. I am doing a video of how to spruce up this dull, boring black hat that you have.
Nice.
Yes, so expect that to be coming at some point when I find out how to edit.
Whereas as Lovecraft, my main thing I've been trying to do is getting people to getting men to stop wearing hats indoors. That's like one of the big drum beats. Because I was that guy. I'm the obnoxious guy who was wearing fedoras and trilbies and things like that. I'd like to think I predate the sort of like men's rights sort of ruining that for everyone, but I might be lying to myself. I never tipped it and went "milady," so
Well,
at
you
least
don't
have
have
that.
the personality to match. So
Well,
that's
thank you
what
very
makes
much.
it good.
I do grow a good neck beard, let me tell you though. It's one of the things my wife loves about the fact that she doesn't love a lot of things about H.P.
Yeah.
Lovecraft. So I'm able to talk about my wife, unlike H.P. Lovecraft. But she does like the fact that having to do this show 3 times a week means I have to shave very regularly, and I can't. Because one of the greatest marital disputes is the fact that I love my gross mustache. You know, when it's out there, and I'm just like, "Hey guys, how's it going?" Which she despises. So Lovecraft means no mustache. So she's happy for the program for that. We have a lot of people in the chat
Oh yes, of course.
who are really hoping to see more of Sade.
Yeah, so Sade is I love Sade, man. Sade is just a lot of fun.
Doing these shows and then creating an evil twin for them is like such a relief. It's such an escape valve.
Yeah, and Sade in particular is the sort of an amalgamation of every film noir femme fatale. Just that sort of like, hey there, how's it? Yeah, you're gonna pay attention to me because I'm here. That's why. Yeah, no, listen to what I've got to say. Which is just kind of. Well, it's the exact opposite of who I am personally, which has been interesting to say the least. But also, it's Sonia had some of that, but from especially that from what I've been able to glean from the letters that I've been able to find at Brown University, she had August. It was in 1947-48, and August Derleth was starting up Arkham House, and he wanted to include the horror at Martin's Beach in one of the collections, and he just expected her to give it to him for free. And then after she said, no, it's my story and you're going to pay me for it, which he was not happy about, then he had said there was talk of a courtesy payment of $600 total after 3 years.
Huh, okay.
Yeah. And so when she wrote this absolutely scathing letter back, which was just absolutely beautiful to read. It starts out, my dear Mr. Derleth.
Oh, snap. Man, there is nothing folks in Lovecraft community love more than seeing August Derleth taken down a peg, let me tell you.
Oh man, it's a doozy. I can actually, so I took pictures. I was able to take it's like, so I was able to scan with my phone, but
oh, gotcha.
I was able to get take home the letters with me.
Yes.
And I can post those pictures on my Twitter after this because they are absolutely beautiful and everyone needs to read them. The handwriting can get a little hairy at times, but so I'm just warning you now, but it's absolutely beautiful. And Derleth had tried to get the story through multiple channels. He had tried using a fake name.
Hello, I am interested in your story.
Yeah, and he had tried having one of the Arkham House publishers, Mr. Abramson, to try to muscle the story out of her, and he had also because she had sent a copy of the story to a journalist at the Providence Journal, which is a newspaper out here. He had wanted to use either sections of the story or just quotations in a as part of, from what I can gather, as part of a it's been 10 years. Here was the guy that lived here. Sort of,
gotcha. Right.
Like a look back, sort of
retrospective.
Yeah. retrospective, but so she sent a telegram to him saying, "Do not, under any circumstances, give my story to this guy."
Dang, Derleth, calm it down.
Yeah,
Thirsty.
it was, yeah. But so she had opinions and she would be heard, but not in the same way that Sade is. Sade is very in your face and very like, you're going to pay attention to me because I am right here. And Sonia is, or at least my version of Sonia is a much more of a she won't be talked over. They're gosh, words. How do I put this? Especially from what I can gather from the Lovecraft as I knew him, there are a couple of times when it's like she's vague, like vague blogging, but not yeah, about other people who have tried to write about their time together. And like there's a when she's talking about how they basically rewrote the Houdini story, Imprisoned with the Pharaohs, or Under the Pyramids, or whatever it eventually was going to be called.
Well, that was their honeymoon.
Yeah, that was their honeymoon, which should have been a red flag. But then he went on to use the money that he got from that story to buy her wedding ring, which is also very sweet. She calls him at one point. She calls him a lovable skinflint or something to that effect. But she. Oh boy. Yeah. So she says, "It was not, as someone has said, a public stenographer who copied the handwritten notes, which HP still had. I alone was able to read those crossed out notes." So you can kind of tell that there have been some people who have tried to have their own version of what happened, and she's here to set the record straight. And
I think that's, you know, that's very important because and again, as I said earlier in the show, you know, one of the tragedies is how reduced to, you know, Mrs. Lovecraft.
She didn't, for the longest time, her Wikipedia entry rerouted to Lovecraft.
Oh,
a little section of his Wikipedia, which, and thankfully now she has her own,
yeah.
As she should. Both her and her daughter have their own, which her relationship with her and her daughter is something else too. Like that's a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, it is just, and even then they were trying to reduce her and erase almost to just get rid of what contributions she had to his get out of here, you stupid fly. Sorry. I had my window open earlier and now I'm paying for it. So, but they were trying to make it seem as if here is this guy, and yeah, he had a wife, but here is this guy, and it's just, she was wonderful and just a fascinating person, like you said, and it's so terrible.
Yes. Well, no, it is, and I think I mean, it's, you know, it's part of the problem of how Lovecraft has been so elevated, right? You know, people, you know, think sort of want to view Lovecraft as this, again, this insane genius who sort of sprung out of nowhere, who taught himself everything, and in so doing, they erase, look, Dunsany, Mackin, Bierce, all the people he was reading, all the people he was pastiching. They erase the people he was communicating with. They erase Sonia. They erase Loveman. They erase, all this entire,
pretty much the rest of his correspondence.
Well, and that sense of community, right? And I think, that's, I don't know. I don't know if that's just because we have this kind of, notion of the poet soldier, the stoic, figure who just sort of sits at the typewriter and bangs things out
Yeah.
and isn't part of community, which is so funny because so many of, people in the Lovecraft world are in constant communication and
Oh
community with
yeah.
each other. They're all buying each other's books. They're
Yep.
all, ripping each other apart and like
Yep. Yep.
backstabbing each
Yep.
other
Yep.
or like, thumbing each other up. Like it's so
Yeah.
incestuous and yet,
Well,
so
and it's
rich and wonderful. Like I don't know, there's a liveliness to it
yeah.
that's so similar, right? It's like,
Yeah.
80
And
years
I
has
mean,
passed.
to me, I mean, maybe it's just because I came at it after I had started to have a presence online and started to sort of get integrated in online like fan communities and things like that. I really saw parallels between the the fan communities of today and his like his writing circle. Like, I mean, everybody has the couple of mutuals that follow them and they follow you, and you talk occasionally, and if there's something that happens that in the fandom, oh boy, you say, hey, did you see this thing that happened? And they're like, oh my god, yes, I did. It's it's very similar to his writing circles, and that's partly, I say partly, that's mainly what got me into the wanting to know more about the actual people as opposed to all of the stories. I mean, the stories too, but the people behind them is they're just it's remarkable.
No, and I think as actors, we both come from a theatrical background. I think we have a similar orthogonal approach into this. We are interested in these characters. The
Yeah.
stories are there, but like the people, the
Oh yeah.
minds that are able to come up with it, the strange just contradictions. Here is this guy who on one hand is writing the most like anti-Semitic, xenophobic, nightmarish stuff, then marrying a Jewish Ukrainian self-made woman. And
Yeah.
now again, people sort of point to that and be like, well, he couldn't have been that racist. And I always remind folks that white supremacists always seem to be really good at finding the good ones
Oh yeah.
and making exceptions when it suits them. So
Mhm.
there's in the play, I hope it's a real line from their correspondence, but it probably isn't. It's probably apocryphal. But there's a great line in the play when Lovecraft rants on about the Jews this and the Jews that, and Sonia says, "You do remember I'm Jewish, right?" And
Yeah.
his response was, "No, you're not a Jew. You're a Lovecraft."
Yeah, that is actually a thing.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
excellent.
it's
I love it when the things are stranger than fiction.
where's the quote? It's something to the effect of, "You're not that anymore. You're Mrs. H.P. Lovecraft of such and such Angel Street, Providence, Rhode Island." Which I'll post the actual quote on my Twitter, or I'll post it online later.
Except she didn't
But
ever live in Providence with him,
yeah,
did
no,
she?
she didn't. So she actually tried.
I know.
She tried so hard to keep their relationship going. Bless her heart. She tried so hard, and it I may scan because, all right, so it's incredibly frustrating to me that the correspondence and the things like this Lovecraft as I knew him are so hard to find. Because, I mean, personally, I'm from a very small town in the Midwest where there isn't anything like that around. There isn't, like, I mean, living in Providence now, I'm a 3-hour drive from New York City. I'm a 45-minute drive from Boston. And it's Providence. Like, there's stuff going on all the time here. And
There's literally a major like writing convention happening like right now.
exactly, yeah. And it was so frustrating to me when I was starting out, because I would find like, oh yeah, well there are these there's this memoir that was written, and oh wait, no, it's in a very small pamphlet that only had a limited run in 1934, and it's like $150 now, and I'm in college, I don't have that kind of money, so I may I may scan parts of this to post online, and I mean, I'm definitely going to post some of the letters that I have of hers. Partly because I am like 90% sure that Brown University has posted them as well, but also because to try to dispel the myth that he just like you said, that he was up in some attic pounding away at this typewriter. He was all alone, and then oh yeah, and then he died, and then he became famous. You know, it wasn't really like that at all. And the more that people have access to these things, I think the less the less excuse that they'll have to keep on thinking that sort of myth that they have about him.
No, it's very true. And I think it's wonderful the work you've done and coming up and finding a way to showcase her personality, showcase her politics as well as the fashion. Like she. I feel like Sonia really allows you to explore, as you've said, not just the 1930s, but
Oh yeah.
Womanhood now and
Oh yeah.
being in a minority now and
Yeah.
and that intersectionality and how it's
Yeah.
still very fraught. The love we had we've had Molly Tanzer and Sylvia Marina Garcia on, but they still talk about the struggles of women trying to break in and write
Oh
in
yeah.
this world. It's treated like a boys' club that's always been a boys' club,
Yep.
and yet at the very beginning there is Sonia.
Yeah, publishing her own magazine, The Rainbow, and pretty much single-handedly funding Lovecraft throughout their marriage. Like she sent him. So he was supposed to get $15 a week from his aunts, but they only sent him $5 a week, and sometimes they didn't send him any, which is understandable because they were trying to conserve what money they had. The estate of Lovecraft's grandfather was terribly mismanaged after his death, and so when I believe they had $20,000 to last his entire life and the entire lives of both of his aunts, which even accounting for inflation, like we're talking about an entire lifetime here. That's not a whole lot.
Luckily Lovecraft was very helpful in dying very early, so
yes.
If he had known, he wouldn't have been, maybe not have been so stingy, but
yeah,
hindsight and all that.
It again, going back to the memoir, she says that he hated going to the doctor. He said that he never wanted to go to the doctor, and which there's a lot. Really, so the overarching theme, if there could be a theme to somebody's life, the overarching theme of the memoir is that stubbornness is a bad idea because he was too stubborn to go to the doctor. He at first he had wanted to leave Providence and move to New York when they were before they got married, and then he moved to New York, and Sonia had to find work elsewhere. She found a job in Cleveland, and she had to move out there, and she wanted him to live in the Midwest with her, but he didn't. He absolutely flat out did not want to leave the East Coast, but especially not New York, where he had been living for some time. Then
he also didn't want to move his furniture, right? I mean, there's like a bunch of weird.
Well, and he didn't want to. First, he didn't want to. He really was not happy in New York, and so Sonia had said to him something to the effect of, "So just go back to Providence, you idiot! Just go." And then he said, "Well, I don't want to go back to Providence without you." And she couldn't leave her job in Cleveland. There wasn't work for her in Providence, so she couldn't go back to Providence with him. And she at one point offers to move to Providence and open her own store in what, from her description, what seems to be like the second part of a duplex, where him and his aunts and her and possibly a maid would live in the other half, and his aunts flat out refused that. They didn't want to be any wife of Howard's to have to work for her living.
Yeah, that's always struck me. That like it's
Which,
like not her being Jewish, not her being, you know, an immigrant. I'm sure that was there, but it was the like, no, a working woman, a
like,
shopkeeper.
how else do you think people make money? Like, but they thought that they considered themselves like uh, not the landed gentry, because America doesn't have gentry, but like that sort of person who is just has all this accumulated wealth and they'll never have to work ever.
Well, it's that
That's
old money, that very New England,
yeah,
very Gilmore
yeah,
Girls.
yeah. And they, I mean, Vanderbilts, they were not. Maybe at one point, but definitely not by the time Sonia came along. And it, and then he absolutely he got offered later on, after all of everything with Sonia, he got offered the editorship of Weird Tales,
Yeah.
but he'd have to move to Chicago.
It's a
And
tale of keeping out of the Midwest, you know, the horror.
yeah, which I can relate.
The horror that came from the Great Lakes.
As someone who is, the town that I'm from is 2 hours east of Chicago, and yeah, I get it. Especially in the 20s, the 20s and 30s, when there's Al Capone. I, maybe not the best idea, but it it just, it's tragic almost that you can see where things could have gone right if he had just not been so damn stubborn about literally everything. But if, I mean, even if he had just sucked it up and gone to the doctor, he probably wouldn't have died when he had.
Well, yeah, and that's the what if of that is always huge, right? Because I mean, cancer, you know, stomach cancer
Well,
is a hard thing
especially in the 30s.
to get out of. But no, I mean, between his like malnutrition, between
Yeah,
his like just,
which
you
seems to
know,
be a bit of a systemic thing.
yeah,
She writes about how before they were married, he was just incredibly thin, and she would make him, before going to work. She would make him breakfast, and she would make a couple Dagwoodian sandwiches, which is her words, not mine, and various fruits and vegetables. And he gained weight and he became more happy, because you tend to be a little more happy when you aren't literally starving. Who'd have thought, you know?
I can see the photos of them where like
Oh
he's a bit more paunchy, he's got a bit more
yeah,
dad bod.
yeah.
I could very easily portray that era Lovecraft these days. I'm sort of losing the gauntness.
Hey, I mean, better that than the gauntness, I gotta say, because
Well, thank you so much. Everyone is yelling at me to tell you how phenomenal an actor you are, phenomenal performer you are.
oh shucks.
And I mean, you know, it's you've taken it upon yourself a challenge of this character who, again, is sort of known as a footnote, and yet
Yeah.
is worth so much more. And you've breathed so much life into her. And I think I hope that you have a chance to do more. Are you planning on sort of looking into other like live performances, you know, or things like
So
that?
I I mean, I don't have anything planned at the moment. I am going to be going to the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in August,
Yeah.
and I managed to get those days off of work. So I will be pretty much. I have a full 3 day pass. I'll be there all day, every day, and I mainly because I live so close to where everything is going to be now, which has been absolutely fantastic. Uh, I actually timed my move so that I would be in town for the Necronomicon last year, so that I wouldn't have to worry about getting a hotel, which worked out beautifully, I have to say. But I, now that I'm a little more established financially, and I have a little more like, I'm not having to really watch what I spend. I'll be able to spend a little more time at the convention where I won't have to be like, no, don't go to the dealer's hall. I know I can't buy anything, so I'm just not even gonna go. Like I'll be able to actually be out and about and like in with the people. So and as I said earlier, I have probably too many vintage outfits, so I will be there and probably pretty recognizable.
Oh,
So if
fantastic.
anybody sees me, then by all means come up and say hi. Uh, as far as videos go, I have a couple of series or a couple of uh, ideas, extended ideas. The word for which is completely escaping me at the moment. But I am going to be doing a couple of videos on her reacting to various aspects of the modern day called I Thought We Went Through This Already. And I also, in somewhat dealing with Lovecraft's like chronic malnutrition. Now there are cooking videos, and they're like this sort of dealing with oh well, you know, I would make myself food, but I don't know how. So I am going to I've got a couple of things to that effect in the works. Like this is what you need. Here's how to do it. Now feed yourself, damn it.
That's very, very helpful, very useful. Also, you know, how
Yeah.
people can feed themselves when they're going to these conventions is also could be
Oh yeah.
a real life-saving task.
God, yeah. And I, as I said before, I have a directly in the works, like as in I just finished filming a part one of a thing yesterday. That was, or that is, I should say, how to spruce up this dull black hat that you have. Uh, since uh, she was a milliner, and that is a very prominent part of who she was. And I myself, A, don't know how to make hats, and B, don't have the money to get all of the things that you need to make hats. So here's how to adapt. So I have a hat that has a very wide brim and has a very sort of Edwardian silhouette,
Oh, okay.
but it's just black straw, which is not very Edwardian because the Edwardians had literally everything on their hats, like everything and the kitchen sink. And they like there's a person on YouTube who it makes historical costuming, and she makes hats that go along with them, and she put like an entire dead bird on one.
Nice. Yes.
And it's gorgeous, but it's also like quite frankly ridiculous.
That's less sort of
So
Edwardian and more like Edward Gorian.
yeah, kind of. But so I went out and I got a couple peacock feathers, and that's going to be coming out at some point. It's just a matter of finding the time.
That is always as time is the great enemy, as Lovecraft discovered at the very end.
Oh God.
Well, thank you so much, Stella, for being on the show. Where can folks find you? What's the best place where you can, yeah, people are interested in your work and your videos that are coming out, your cooking videos. We've already got some
Yes.
excitement for.
Good. Yeah. So I'll be. So I have a YouTube channel. If you search for Radio Free Arkham on YouTube, I believe it comes up. But I also check Twitter a little more often than that. And my Twitter is rather Lovecraftian. It's not underscore Scalba, as a reference to Randolph Carter. Which whenever I post videos, I post the links on there, and that is a pretty good way to get a hold of me. Apart from that, or rather, Sonia has a Tumblr, which is, oh boy, what is it? It is The Adventures of Sonia, which links will all end up on my Twitter because that is what I end up looking at the most when work gets dull. So so yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We're really excited about what's coming down the pike. And thank you to everyone who's been following along. If you at home are watching this later and you would like to be part of our live conversation, ask questions of the guest, ask questions of me, yell at us from the sidelines, get into some interesting conversations about shipping pH and SAID, which I'm not going to get into here. Then you need to go ahead and join the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society on Facebook. It's a lively community, folks who are sharing their art, talking about Lovecraft. It is luckily devoid of some of the worst excesses we sometimes see out in social media. We're all friends there. If you're interested in Ask Lovecraft, if you've come to this from elsewhere, Ask Lovecraft is a comedy advice show at asklovecraft.com. Airs 3 times a week for some reason. And you can follow me on Twitter at Lehman Kessler. You can find out about live shows, interviews, and whatnot at lehmankessler.com. Thank you so much for watching. Stella, once again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.